Well, welcome back to Simple Truth. Hey, we're in the book of 1 Samuel. We're in chapter 18, right? We're in the plot of Saul to how to get David, right? We made this much longer than the actual verses are, but we're in verse 22, right? Saul has just found out that his daughter loves David, and he's excited about it, right? So he says in verse 22, Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private and say, behold, the king has delight in you. All his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. Right? And Saul's servant spoke these words in the ears of David. And David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I'm a poor man and have no reputation? Right? So Saul's trying to lay this trap. He wants David to become his son-in-law. He wants access to him. He wants to try to control this anointing, right? He wants him to be underneath him. Listen, I've seen this happen a ton in life. People who recognize somebody's anointed in something very quickly want to keep that person under wrap. We want to control it. See it, jealousy all the time. People who are gifted at speaking, right? Those who are not gifted at speaking, they quickly want to control when, where, how, why that person speaks. Right? We don't want to put them up in front of people. It's funny that God finds ways around that, and he'll elevate somebody no matter what, and it just creates more jealousy, more animosity, right? So Saul's trying to get control of David, get control of this anointing. I want him in my fold. I want him part of my family, right? Then I can come up with a plan as to how to deal with this. I want access to this, right? There's part of Saul that most likely wants the anointing that David has. Maybe he thinks if I get rid of David, the anointing will come back to me, right? So he comes up with this plan and he says, hey, listen, why don't you guys, my servants, why don't you just start speaking to David about how much I like him, how much I want him to be part of the family, how much I want him to be part of what I have planned, right? Manipulating this whole thing. But notice David's response is the same. While Saul is working with or for the enemy, David has his eyes fixed on God. And he recognizes, he's got a humility about him that is protecting him. Do you know that God gives us character traits sometimes that protect us from people? You know, sometimes that very character trait that we wish would go away, maybe does need to be polished up and smoothed out a little bit. But we always want to polish and smooth out characteristics so that people are more palatable. What if they're not supposed to be palatable? What if David isn't supposed to be more palatable for Saul? What if this humility, right, uncharacteristic humility, who wouldn't want to be part of the king's family? What if this is actually protection? What if that little edginess to you, right, that everybody wants to go away, what if that's some protection, right? What if your, whatever it is, actually is going to protect you in some way, shape, or form, right? You're too nice, you're too this, you're too that, you're too whatever. What if God has put that in such a way as to protect you against the schemes of the enemy? The enemy can't make you angry, can't make you jealous, can't make you frustrated because you're humble, right? God said, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, right? Turn to me, humble themselves. Humility, recognizing your place in not your family, not your workplace, but in God's kingdom, in God's economy, recognizing who God is and I deserve nothing. That's important, right? So David's response thwarts another attempt at the enemy to get control, right, of an anointing. The enemy wants control of the anointing. It's why he wants to collect people in churches, why he wants to collect people in workplaces, why he wants to collect people all over the place. I don't really need all of this, right? I want to control it. I don't want other people to have it. I don't want other people to be able to use it. Lots of times, workplaces, right? We don't need all of this talent in one place. We just don't want somebody else to get. We recognize the talent and we're going to take it, even though we don't really have a job, position, title, place. We don't have anything for you, but we recognize that, like, hey, we want control of this whole thing. There's something about it. So why in politics people are always trying to get other people to sign off that, like, hey, you won't run, or you won't do this, or you won't do that. It protects, right? So maybe today you need to, again, look at this whole thing. Been harping on it for 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, right? Pay attention to this. God's trying to thwart the plan of the enemy. He's made you in such a way that ought to happen naturally. But you have to be able to recognize those things, right? And be able to look at this whole thing and say, you know what? I don't know that I should be a son-in-law. Maybe God's telling you that you shouldn't be something when everybody else is telling you that you should, right? Are you in tune enough with God that you can thwart the plans of the enemy? I want to finish up with verse 24 here, right? The servants of Saul said to him, thus and so did David speak, right? Verse 25, then Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, so that he might be avenged for the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. You see how the trap is being set. Saul didn't really want David. He wants David dead, right? He knows how David feels about being the king's son-in-law, and so it's being tricked. He's being tricked into David trying to be killed, right? It's the same thing. The enemy knows your stances. He knows what you are firm on, and he's going to try to use that very thing to get you to go out of bounds. Your work ethic, right? All of those characteristics that are good, the love, like we talked about earlier, right? He's going to attempt to use the godly characteristics, twist them, and get you to do things that you wouldn't normally do or that you shouldn't do out of zeal for doing things the way you think they should be done. Right? This is dangerous. We see this again, and we see this frequently. People's zeal for doing things the right way gets them blind to loving in that right way. Gets them blind to serving others in that right way. I do believe that there are politicians. I do believe that there are church leaders that start out with a real zeal to serve other people. But that zeal gets them off track as they begin to fall for the plans of the enemy. Get involved in this and do this and get here and get here and get here. And pretty soon, he can get us in a trap where we're out of the protection of God. So this simple truth, pay attention. Right? Pay attention to what is it that the enemy might be attempting to get you to do that falls into, so that you fall into his hands, right? That all seems good on the front side. Maybe your work ethic is a great thing and the enemy is attempting to use that against you. Maybe your caring, your kindness, right? Your generosity. He's going to try to use that to get you off track. Remember, the enemy doesn't want you scratched, frightened. He wants to devour you. He wants you dead, right? So he's going to come up with plans that do that, right? Either get you into the category of lukewarm or keep you in the category of cold, right? Those two things don't get you to heaven. Right? Being hot for God, that gets you to heaven. But if he can get you into lukewarm, right? God's not who he said he is. God's not going to do what he said he's going to do. If he can get you there, or he can get you cold, there just isn't a reason to believe in God. There isn't a reason to give him my trust or make him Lord of my life. Then the enemy wins. Right? So keep your focus. We'll see you next time on Simple Truth.